Welcome. You are in Cognitive Services Vision 101, and I'm Alicia Moniz. I'm an analytics lead with Avnod. Just a friendly reminder, if we could please silence our cell phones. Thank you. And a little bit about me. So I've been in the database BI services industry for over 10 years. My background is in reporting and data warehousing analytics, mostly in the Microsoft ecosystem. I'm a certified architect in both AWS and Azure, and I also am certified in big data in both platforms. My current position allows me to play in the cloud, and I also host the Global AI Bootcamp and the Global Azure Bootcamp, both of them in Houston. So I'm not sure if you all are aware, but Past Summit is going to be in Houston next year. So definitely excited to be seeing all of y'all in my town next year, right? So this is today's agenda. This is a 101 session. So what I like to do is I like to cover a variety of tools and introduce you to a number of resources. And the goal is to show you a lot so that you kind of have a more overall understanding of what the tools can do and what tools can help you develop faster, and provide you with direction when you're ready to look more into the documentation. So we're going to go ahead and get started with getting to know cognitive services. We're going to build a custom vision model. We'll do an introduction to Azure Notebooks. We'll interact with the FACE API, and that's one of the new APIs that are part of cognitive services. And then we'll do a demo on containers. And that is actually very, very cool. So it's at the end, so hang in there. And but definitely game changing. And when you talk to people about data and security and some of these tools and capabilities that we have to now process on-prem is just amazing. So we'll get to that. Okay, so let's get to know cognitive services. So the first place I usually start off with when I'm having a conversation with somebody who doesn't have any exposure to the AI tool set is I'll go ahead and refer them to AI demos. So this page is an interface to all of the cognitive services APIs, and it's a real quick and easy way for you to get a business user or a sales partner or a team member kind of oriented with, hey, what does Microsoft AI do and what can it do for me? So we can go ahead and play around with most of the APIs here, and they keep this site up to date and available, so you don't have to travel around with your toolkit. We can get started with text analytics. We'll just go ahead and try it out, and we can enter in a phrase. And you can see that the API does a couple of different things in one step. So we've got some key phrases here. We've got our sentiment analysis here. The next step is entity linking. So it's called out that Hawaii is probably an entity. I can go ahead and click on there, and it'll take me to the Wikipedia page. So for the text API, a lot of the training was done on the Wikipedia content. So when you're using content, like text or images from Wikipedia, then your accuracy ratings are going to be extremely high because that's part of the training set that they used. We can go ahead and take a quick look at computer vision. So the computer vision API is going to have about 4 different capabilities that are packaged and available right off the box. So you don't have to do any training. You don't need your own set of image files. It's already built out. It's as a service, so they'll go ahead and host it on their resources. And basically what you're doing is you're going to go ahead and pass images to the service, and they'll go ahead and pass back the attributes. We get tags back from images. We get confidence levels. And it's interesting here because we have a description, which is text, and a confidence level there. So you can see that as they make developments and advancements in text, it'll go ahead and flow over to the capabilities of other APIs like Vision. So they're only iterating faster and faster, right? And you can see the importance of ethics in AI because there's actually been a lot of work as far as identifying this adult content out on the web. So that's already built into the API as well. So we've gone ahead and analyzed and described images. We can read text out of images. There's multiple instances of the number 42 in here, and it's called out both instances. So transcription and handwriting. And this one always cracks me up. It's celebrities and landmarks. And so I always wonder what early customer they had who, had the data for them to focus on that use case in particular. So I always find that funny.
How does it collect that data on celebrities, for example?
Yeah. Well, so what they've done is they've already mined the data. They've already classified the training data, and then built the model, and it's already established. Well, it's kind of interesting because AI bias is another topic, right? And the data that you're using to train a model is going to affect the outcome and the decisions of the model, right? So regionally, and especially when you're looking at visual, probabilities and outcomes are different based on region, just because people look different in different regions, right? So the variations and the nuances are going to be more pronounced where you are. So like you'll see this in a lot of the language API, and that's one of the challenges in, you'll notice they don't have all of the foreign languages available yet for translation. And it's because regionally, and when you look at how people talk and how they're putting together the sentences, it's your accuracy as far as your prediction is going to change based on where you're hearing that. Does that make sense? So it's the same thing with images. If and we'll go through a use case, but if you're doing like object detection of a certain something, so we were talking about predictive maintenance earlier, right? So if the company uses one type of machine in the US, and they'll use a different type of machine in Australia, right? Then you have a different model. You know, maybe it has different parts, and it won't give you the same result set. Does that make sense? Yeah. So the API services that Microsoft offered, the models are already built. You'll send the text or the sentence string or the image file, and you don't get to change what's under the covers. So they've already done all the work, and you'll get something back. The question was, does this work for any kind of image? And I think they have, you mean PNG, JPEG? Yeah, well, I guess that's why it's called celebrities, right? Because what you're doing is you're taking an existing use case. So I definitely wouldn't be recognized, I don't think. So for me to be positively identified via that model, they would have had to have collected X many images of me and clearly been able to label me as Alicia, right? So it's kind of interesting because one of the speakers that I listen to who usually talks about, a lot about AI. So her name's Cassie, she works for Google, and she's their chief data scientist. And how she explains AI is the art of kind of teaching by example, right? So as programmers, we start off and we write code and we build use cases, right? So if A, then B, you know, if C, then D. And then that's where you get your programmer/user error, right? It's because it's what cases are we testing for and attributing actions to. So with AI, and especially with like the vision, it's the data points are different where we're telling it that this is a ball or this is a cup or, you know, this is a car, and we're telling it in so many different ways that it can go ahead and make those associations. So, but then again, it goes back to, you know, what is your training data? So if I feed in 5,000 pictures of a black car, you know, and it's cars, it's trucks, it's vans, you know, but they're all black, then what is it gonna think when I feed it in a red car, right? So when we're working with the Vision API, it's kind of interesting because these are the factors that affect your outcome is your combinations, lighting, and, you know, it's bad data in, bad data out, right? Okay, so we went over the AI demos. So we've talked about what's kind of in the black box and what they have available that's already built out. So that's computer vision. So now we want to talk about what if I do want to build my own model? You know, and I do have my use case, and I want to get that binary yes or no. Then that's where we'd go ahead and use the custom vision. So the custom vision app will be API based. So the parameters are still There's a defined set of parameters, and there's defined attributes that get passed back. But what you're able to do is you're actually able to upload your own images, train the model, and then perform evaluations where if you aren't getting enough, true positives, then you can go ahead and make changes to either your training set or your tolerance levels to go ahead and change the outcome of your predictor.
So if we wanted to, so at the police department, we have a group that is specific for the mentally ill population in Albuquerque, right? So we could upload the pictures of those chronic people that we know are, and then somehow use that during an incident to go, oh, we're seeing Joe is on the scene, right?
Mm-hmm.
Could we do something like that with this? I'm just trying to figure out ways that I could use this.
I would say, should you?
Should I? Right.
I would say, should you? And
Ethics aside, is that something that's going to be used for?
so I think once you look at the capabilities, that question comes out a lot, is should you? So I see that coming up a lot more in the very, very near future.
I would use it more as okay, we need to send our crisis unit out there instead of the police.
Yeah.
We can recognize that it is one of our mentally ill people. Instead
Mm-hmm.
of sending the police, we send a different team,
Yeah.
right?
But then again, it's really a should, So there's I think there's a couple of incidents where people are already using, facial recognition for access, right? So I think there was an airline that they were trying to expedite boarding and using facial recognition, but that's a data point about you. Your face is a data point about you, and there should be I should opt into that, I think, personal. Sorry, I have very strong opinions about this. So one of the attributes that you can pull out of object detection are, it can actually pull out the coordinates of an item, sorry, 1 second, within a frame. And we do work with robotics, so me arms, and we do work with drones. So when you can pull out coordinates relative to something else in a data frame, then you can go ahead and pass coordinates back to robotic items. So okay, so let's talk about some AI for good. And I recently relocated to Houston, and this was after Harvey, but you can see through the time lapse that over the period of, I think it was less than a week, the water actually rose up 10 feet. And it's, when you look at, do we have opportunities to provide early detection, and we're talking about use cases for AI, and preventative maintenance and early alerting are some of the big use cases where we can provide a lot of value and go through a lot of data a lot quicker than if we had analysts looking at data being fed in from a device, right? So I found another time-lapse video, and this one's over a waterway. And there's basically the water gradually inches over and over, but if you look at the information that you can get from the service, from the video. It's you have the rate of change, and maybe there's an opportunity for us to do some classification as far as, is it flooded, yes or no, right? And that's just a straight binary classification. So I went ahead and took some stills out of the video, and that is what we're using today to build our custom model. So go ahead and let's just stop that for now, and I'll get us switched over. So I have my projects on the customvision.ai site. And we're going to go ahead and create a new project. And there's going to be two types of projects. So we've got classification and object detection. Right now I don't necessarily need coordinates out of the image. I'm just doing a binary yes or no. So I'm using the classification project type. I'll go ahead and stick to multi-class. So that's a single tag per image, and that just makes it easier for me when I'm doing my training. And then we've got domains. So when we talk about the data sets that they're using for training, and we talk about the regional dependencies, like you can see in the future how as the tool gets more widely used and as more of the data and the models get open source, that we'll have more domains, right? Right now, I'm just using the general domain. And sorry, I am on the free tier, so you do have a limit to how much you can do on the free tier. So let me just delete that really quickly.
So that's the number of active projects?
Yeah. So we can definitely look at pricing. But it's actually a really good question to think about. All of the APIs have quite a bit of iterations and testing that you can do on the free tier. So if you're worried about using up your Azure budget allocation, I think it's 30,000 different tests that I can do against one model. So hold on a sec. So you can do 5,000 training images per project and 10,000 predictions per month, right? So you could probably have a project that runs, that's quite a few predictions a month. And all of the APIs have that free tier, so you don't have to worry as much about getting on there and just working through it start to finish. They make it really easy for you to have access to it. Let me see if it'll let me. Yeah, this one's SO, so it's not the free model, so that's why they let me do that. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we'll go ahead and this is the UI for managing your model and building it out. We'll just go ahead and add some images. So I've taken stills out of the video, and I tried to identify areas where the water was just completely over the spillway. So these are my true positives for a flood scenario. You can go ahead and do a bulk upload. And I'm just going to tag them as flooded. So you can see the images just a little bit better. And I also have images where the water is not quite so high. I just enabled them okay. We can do not flooded. We can go ahead and toggle back and forth to take a look at our data set. So these are our training images. We're going to go ahead and train our model. We have a precision of 75% and recall of 75%. So precision is going to be how likely is it that your predictions are correct, and then recall is going to be how many of the images in your training set was the model accurately able to label. So if you look at my training images, you will see that I actually have an image here for something that actually shouldn't be classified as flooded. So you can see how your training data affects the outcome of your model. We can go ahead and do a quick test. And this image comes back at 87.4% probability that it's a true positive for flooded. And this comes back 100% not flooded. And it's, so, you just look at how long would it have taken you to code a program to do this, right? And we spent together maybe about 10 to 15 minutes, and we didn't have to collect years and years of data, right? It's a collection of 40 pictures. So you can see how AI is doing a lot to help us with the labeling and the classification, and that's really where the benefits are right now, is to help us to process and chunk through the data just so much faster than any one person would be able to do. Like, how many analysts would have had to have gone through this data to come up with something that would generate a classifier for us, right? Okay, so we can go ahead and take a look at the API documentation, and this will tell us what points we expect back from the service.
Do they have microservices to provide the API?
So they actually have it on containers. Yeah, so that's our last demo. It's so exciting. So because they're API based, they actually give you examples of how to make the requests to and from the service. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we can go ahead and post. This is going to be the region that my API is hosted. So I'm posting the name of my project, and then I'll have a subscription key, and that will control access to my model, right? So I just need my subscription key and my endpoint URL. And then I can programmatically pass images for prediction, and I can also programmatically pass images for additional training. Okay, so next I'd like to talk a little bit about Azure Notebooks. And who here uses Azure Notebooks? Jupyter Notebooks, programming in Python. Okay, so this is why I like to bring this up in my session, because a lot of us aren't using all the tools that are out there, and there's so many tools. So usually when I work with teams on Python projects, they'll go ahead and send me over code, and then I have to install things on my laptop, and then I have to make sure all my libraries are up to date, and then I have to make sure that everything's on the same version. And most of my data scientists do not use source control. So I really like to use Azure Notebooks because everything's self-contained, and I don't have to maintain a code-based environment. It's I can jump in there. I can pick my version of Python that I'd like to code in. It runs on the compiler. It's self-contained. I don't have to worry about adding things to my registry on my laptop or being compatible with other people. So you can get to notebooks via notebooks.azure.com. So this is my directory. Let me just start at the beginning for you.
What happens when you get that new version?
Yeah, it's just an available version, so you can select it. So you're in the environment and you're able to start your coding. When you create a new set of code, you tell it what version you'd like the compiler to run at. Does that make sense? So we're in projects, and I'm going to go ahead and open up my notebook. And I really like it because it's got the code and the markdown kind of integrated. So when I hand off code to people, I like to hand it off where it answers all the questions that they may have. So I don't get that call at 2 o'clock in the morning, right, for anything. So I like to embed screenshots as well as instructions, and it lets you do that in one place, and it makes it very user-friendly. So we've done the custom vision and we've done the computer vision. Now I'd like to talk to you about the Face API. So the Face API is one of the newer APIs. So it'll let you go ahead and do, yes?
I'm not sure, I guess I'm not sure if you're gonna get back to the notebooks, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what did we just see? I'm not sure what that was that you just showed us.
In the notebooks, or?
Well, you explained a lot, but we didn't really see it. I'm not sure what I guess, you mentioned a tool that you think we should use. What are we looking at?
Oh, well, so this is Python code in Azure Notebooks, which is the Azure version of Jupyter Notebooks. I'm going to programmatically reference the Face API, but I'm going to show you what the Face API is first, and then we'll go ahead and pass the code to it. Does that make sense? Okay. And so we can go ahead and play around with it, just like the AI demos page. And I want to give you a look at what data we can expect back out from the API. So we've got our bounding box, so it will give you the coordinates of what it's using for analysis. We have some attributes. So hair color, smile and head pose, gender, so male or female, facial hair, and it's mustache, beard, and sideburns. So I thought that was pretty interesting. So I almost did a demo on beard trend lines, right? But I just thought that I would go crazy with the training set because I would have to find so many pictures, right, to get like a statistically relevant outcome from that model, right? So we've got emotion here, accessories, and they actually go into detail for different characteristics on the face. So you've got upper lip, bottom lip, nose, eyebrows. And so if we want to go back to our Jupyter Notebook, now that we know what the API does, I'm sorry?
Maybe we can take that JSON and save it in our Cosmos.
Yep, there you go. So, and all of the APIs return data back in JSON. So once you figure out kind of the methodology for communicating with it back and forth, it's pretty easy, right? So this is Python 3.6. I'm just gonna go ahead and define my headers. This is my key. So this is how I'm getting access to my model. There's a number of face attributes, but I don't really need all of them. So right now I'm pulling gender and facial hair. Landmarks false, I don't need the number of the coordinates of any of the eyebrows or the lips. And this is the image that I'm referencing. So my question for the API is gender classification. So let me go ahead and show you the picture I'm using. So this was at an event in our Houston office, and I think it's clipping it off. Hold on one second. Okay, this one's better. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So there's 10 of us, and there's 2 ladies. So we can go ahead and pass gender. And I was still curious about the facial hair question, so I left facial hair in there just to kind of see what would come back, right? And I'm gonna go ahead and open up that picture. My project is called Movember. So I'm referencing my project, and I'll do the post. Oops. I added something that I didn't like. Okay, I think I broke it when I was updating it earlier, so I apologize. But it's the same format as how we had referenced the custom vision, and the big difference with the Face API versus the custom vision API is the parameters that they let you pass through. So apologize for that. So now we're almost at containers. So who here has played around with Docker on a Windows box? Right. So cognitive services will actually let you run your API on a Docker instance, and you only have to worry about authenticating with your model for your subscription level, right? So you're doing metered processing of your data, so you do have capacity pricing, right, for your service. So you can go ahead and install the Cognitive Services API on your container, and it just has to reach back out to your subscription to make sure you haven't hit your limit for that service. So it's not available for all of the APIs, but it's available for quite a few. And there's different pricing tiers. So we've got the face, form recognizer, we have a bunch of the speech services. We're gonna do a demo with the text service, and we'll do it with sentiment analysis. So what they'll do is they'll give you the repo information here. What you'll want to do is you'll go ahead and install Docker. It was a pretty easy install, though I did have to install it twice. So I did a full install, couldn't get it working, uninstalled it, reinstalled it, and it worked the second time around. So the issue I did run into was the shared drives. And you have to run it as an admin when you run it. Now we're in PowerShell. And the first call that I made was to pull the container image from Microsoft's GitHub down to my PC, so or to my laptop. So most of the API containers are available, and there's a couple that you need special access to, and one of them is the face and the attributes, just because I think the processing on it requires more as far as capacity. So you do have access to it, you just have to request it. So I went ahead and did the Docker pull. It copied down the files down to my folders. And we're going to go ahead and work with sentiment today. So my Docker is running, and I can reference the port that it's on. And my container is up right now. So this container is the sentiment analysis service. It's running on my PC, but it's also communicating with my subscription so that they can do the metered processing, right? So we can go ahead and try it out, and it'll give you that UI to pass information to the API. So what I went ahead and did was, they have some pre-available sentences, right? So this is JSON format. The text is having a blast at Pass Summit. The language is English. Not all languages are available for processing, and again, it's because they have to take the time to build the model, and everything's regionally relevant, right? So they have that list of, I think it's 15 or so languages that Sentiment will work against. It went ahead and did a curl, so it posted to my local host. This is running on my laptop, and sent the JSON with the text. So the response was, for sentence number 1, it's 89% certain that that is a positive statement. So, moving forward, there's going to be a lot of use cases where people are going to want the capabilities of AI, but they're not wanting to put all their data on the cloud, right? So especially with the edge devices that they're announcing, so Internet of Things, AI, a lot of these models are going to be built maybe centrally, but be geographically dispersed so that we can leverage them on site. So grocery stores, we were talking about, there's a demo where they're identifying low stock visually at supermarkets by empty places on the shelf, right? So how do you make that attainable and usable at multiple locations. And they'll go ahead and build one model, but have the edge devices house the data and process locally, right? And so a lot of that coming up in the future. And we get the response back in JSON format. So how many of you have seen Postman? Oh, okay, that's interesting. But Postman is, for those of you who aren't aware of it, is another tool that will let you go ahead and pass the data over to the API and then parse the response back. So this is just another method to interact with your API and do some testing programmatically. I'm, again, referencing my container, localhost 5000, and it's a sentiment API. In my header, I have my subscription key, and I'm saying that I'm passing JSON. And in my body, I'm going to go ahead and embed that JSON text with the sentences that I'd like to classify, right? Can go ahead and do the send, and 89% positive that the sentence is a positive sentence. So I can go in. Yeah. It's, well, there, I think, was it Build? Microsoft Build, they did a demo where they can do instant translation during sessions and speeches. And what they're doing is they're using cognitive services to real-time stream the translations. So there's a lot of cool stuff, and you can integrate it into almost everything, right? So you can probably talk at your PC and redo your Power BI reports, and you know you have Q&A now in Power BI, and it's just fantastic that it's all integrated, right? So a lot of the tools are integrated.
I was just talking with one of the women at the Microsoft Center, and she was saying that in the QA now, they've allowed you to build like a custom thesaurus so that your business's acronyms.
Right. And it's all, you know, relative, right? Because we might have totally different businesses and use the same exact words, but in totally different ways, right? So I do see a lot of domains popping up that are very business specific, and people doing more to train their own models. But you know, at the end of the day, we're data stewards, right? And it's equally as important to have that stewardship and to keep that data clean, right? Yeah. Okay. Did anybody have any questions?
So here's the question. So right now, it's intended to be online. Can it be offline? In other words,
Yeah.
let's say you had a robot that was disconnected.
Mm-hmm. So we can actually try that because I'm online. But I have my container running, right? Let me just clear my responses and just make sure we're starting all over. My Postman might be online, so that might not work. But we'll do the Swagger. And try it out, and we'll say something else. So let's try a negative statement. I am hungry. And the score is dropped to 0.026. So the service is still running on my Docker container. I'm not connected to the internet. So it did whatever syncing it had to do. So there's probably a meter in the device, right, that was synced when I was online. So now I'm probably executing against that count locally. And it's still running. So that would be your use case for, an employer who doesn't want to put the data in the cloud, right? Because you're processing data locally. Mm-hmm. And the APIs are fairly easy to get to in Azure. So I had created my projects in Custom Vision AI. I can go ahead and I'm not connected to the internet. So these are all my APIs that I've created. So you have access to your keys and your endpoints. And pretty good access to your documentation, and you can actually test your API on this page. So they break everything out as far as what you should be expecting back from the API. The APIs aren't available in every single region, so if you are playing around with them, I would suggest sticking to some of the more early on regions, just because if you pick a new region, then they may not have the API available. So I'll do US, West or East. And they'll tell you the parameters. They'll give you an example of the payload back in JSON. And you can use your programming language of choice to interact with the API. So it's a lot of fun. If you haven't done it before, you can sit down in an hour and get a model built out and start passing data back and forth against it. And I have my references available. So next year passes in Houston. So looking forward to seeing y'all in Houston next year. And if you can't make it, Pass Online they'll have recordings from the previous year next year. And you can also participate in your local chapter. So I usually attend past meetings, like the user groups, and I also go to SQL Saturdays. So SQL Saturdays are a great way to continue to learn and be involved with the community throughout the year. So you can check the website. They also have virtual groups, and they do record a lot of the sessions. So if you can't get away from work, it's an awesome opportunity to keep learning via PASS, right? And they are giving away gift cards with the session evaluations. So if you have an opportunity, please provide feedback, and that's how everybody gets better. And thank you.